The Lee Group will be holding its 11th annual Small Business Workshop May 14th at 8 a.m. at the Corner Ballpark located at 1680 Michigan Avenue in Detroit. This year's theme is Thriving Through Uncertainty. Come and join the conversation as business leaders from across Detroit will be addressing this critical issue. This is a free event, and for more information, please go to leagroupinnovation.com. That's leagroupinnovation.com and click on the Small Business Workshop tab. All right, welcome to this edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee. Hey, you know what? We're at the beginning of April, and that's no joke. April 1st. Welcome to the conference room, and as you know, this is your source of information for the latest and greatest across the great city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, and of course across the country as well. This week is no exception. I'm pleased to welcome to the conference room a young man who's making a difference. I like to call him a new voice in Detroit's media landscape, Mr. Samuel J. Robinson, and he's the founder of Detroit 1 Million. What is that? We're going to let him explain to that. Explain it to you in a moment. Sam, thanks for joining me in the conference room. How you doing, man?
Mark S. Lee, man, how are you? I'm great. It's a beautiful morning. It's cold, 31 degrees, but it looks nice.
But we know what we know. We know that right around the corner, right? We know it's coming. Right, we know it's coming, that warmer weather. All right. So you and I had a chance to connect over the last several months, but in following you on social media, you're making a difference in Detroit's media landscape and community landscape as well. Talk to us. Who is Sam Robinson? And then explain to us, what is Detroit 1 Million as we dig deep into the conversation.
Sure. I, Sam Robinson, am a journalist. I would pigeonhole myself in news and politics space, but then I would say I don't just cover politics. I'm not just covering, public bodies and government hearings and what the lawmakers are saying. I'm going into neighborhoods. I'm going into the grocery store, into Meijer, on the bus, wherever people are. I'm on Twitter. People know me off of Twitter, and I've worked for MLive, Axios, the Detroit Free Press. The current project that I'm working on now, it's got my full-time attention. It's called Detroit1million.com. We're really trying to cover the news, cover the biggest stories in Detroit and Michigan through the lens of us, our generation. I'm talking about people under 30, people under 40, growing up in a state without a city with 1 million people. Mark, if you look at the map of the United States and you see the states that have cities that contain 1 million people and the states that do not, tells a story. Detroit is, of course, the only U.S. city to ever lose 1 million people in total. Yeah. I said this at the SPJ event that we were at. People sometimes think I'm advocating for 1 million residents to somehow return to the city. As our mayor is contesting Census Bureau data that shows us that about 650,000 people, it's going to take a lot to bring 1 million people back. 5.5 million people call Metro Detroit their home. 10 million people in the United States live in Michigan. That is good for the 10th largest state. So, because of the auto industry, we are this player. We are a relevant cultural place that people across the world know. Let's take pride. Let's reframe Detroit as the cultural center of Michigan, while Gannett and the big newsrooms in the state, I love them. I love the people that work there. But let's be honest, Mark, they're covering Lansing, and they're covering how DC is affecting the state of Michigan. Not as much what's happening in neighborhoods and what's going on in Detroit City Council.
That's what I want to get at. I think you make a good point. Detroit is an iconic city. I was born and raised in the city, and I was in the city way back in the day. I'm still obviously connected, and there, of course, it's here, I should say. It was 1.8 million. And of course, I was in the city. Technically, Detroit tapped out at nearly 2 million people. And I was in the city, 1.5 million people. And to your point, we've lost, had a mass exodus of people for different reasons, whatever it might be. But I'm intrigued by the fact that what you just said about the coverage, like relative to the neighborhoods and the major papers maybe covering Lansing. Is that one of the reasons why you went from, you worked at previous fairly well-known publications, right, covering certain stories, and now you have an independent, kind of an independent journalist, if you will, covering the neighborhoods. Is that where you feel the biggest need is at this point?
Yeah, I do. I really think that there's an opportunity for all journalists, all people, really. When we grew up, uh, talking about, I was born in '97, so go to college, get your degree, maybe even get another degree on top of that. Right now, the kids that are born, maybe when I was in high school, maybe say you were born in 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. Mark, it is literally more realistic to them to be social media marketers, influencers, and startup, individual, private. I mean, that is more realistic than I'm going to go to school and maybe if I work hard and I do this, then maybe this will happen for me because the company will take care of me. Companies will not take care of you. We know that now. The days of Generous Motors, the days of Dow Chemical giving pensions to my grandfather who died in '07, yet somehow my grandmother in 25 at age 95 is still collecting. Those days are done. And so, I just really thought that it was a perfect time to sort of create something in which I had ownership of. You play around with these folks for as long as you can, Mark. I've done it. There's really great folks at these newsrooms. I don't mean to disparage, but
Understood.
it gets to a point where it's tough, man. It's really tough.
But I think one in full disclosure. So Sam and I also were on a panel discussion recently for the Society of Professional Journalists, and I'm the vice president of the Detroit chapter. And he brought a younger perspective. We had awesome panelists, and we were really focused on the state of DEI in terms of the newsroom and how they're covering various segments of the population. But I was intrigued by your comments because you brought a different perspective, that younger perspective, and I like what you're saying in terms of the lens that the next generation, if you will, are looking for the news. It's different. It's not the traditional news outlets. You connected very well. I mean, I found you on social media. You have thousands of followers. And so you're talking to an audience that's yearning for that information through a different lens. Is that how you're able to connect? Is that the future of the news business, for example, in terms of the traditional 6, 10, 11 o'clock news
Yeah.
on a terrestrial TV, if you will, versus now the streaming and the news, the social media sites delivering the content?
Well, I think there's avenues for all types of media in the future, whether it be Maggie Haberman and the traditional OGs doing what they do, whether it be the influencers on the vertical phone, or it's somebody doing a TikTok that's sort of half influencer, half informative. The world is your oyster now for people that want to do media. Elon, of course, is you are the media now, trying to actively disparage legacy media, which I don't do. And that's a kind of a thing that talk about independent
That's because
media.
I'm always on legacy media, by the way. We can't disparage.
No, I mean it's so true. I got my start, and I learned everything that I know through the long timer people, the people that sometimes they'll hate me, they'll bob me on the nose for saying that they're gerontocracy. I really see the generation coming beneath me as like more innovative and more advanced than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm looking at 12, 13, and 14 and 15-year-olds, like, dang, these kids are way more talented, better than I am right now. If I'm able to recognize that, then how are the people that are double my age not able to recognize? And why, Mark? To us, to our generation, we feel like maybe it's territorial, maybe it's resource scarcity. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
really don't know.
Yeah, and everybody can be a podcaster nowadays. Everybody can be you try to be a social media influencer. One of the things I think that as we look to the trajectory in the future of the news operations and business, it's almost like too many outlets out there where people are trying to capitalize and get their name out there, and which leads to this potentially could lead to this misinformation, disinformation, certainly inaccurate reporting, as people they're challenging themselves to be so fast to get the information out that's not always accurate. Whereas a traditional news outlet will say, in theory, they're saying, well, we're still going to check for accuracy and balance in the story. Do you find that somewhat true? Is there still a gap there in terms of how the stories are
Well,
being covered in terms of factual and versus inaccurate?
what my generation deals with now in 2025, I think, that this is a conversation that is like, 18, 19, 20, we were thinking like, wow, look at all these bad actors online posting false stuff that they know is false, right? We've been through the generation of election misinformation in 2020 with voter fraud. Now it's NBA Centel. Now it's like meme. Like we misinformation brings us joy now. Talking about NBA meme accounts that post information knowingly. It started with Ballsack Sports was the account, was what it was called, and people were falling for these infographics because they were so well done as real, not reading that the name on the account was Ballsack Sports. And now we have what's called NBA Centel. It is a riff on a popular NBA Central is the handle, and instead of Central, it is Centel. And this is an account, Mark, that has the attention of all NBA media and all the players. The players will talk about this meme fake news account, and on a post-game shows in their podcasts, and they laugh at it, talking about, oh, you got centelled. It's a verb now. And so, it is a whole new universe out here talking about misinformation.
There are two other topics briefly I want to hit on too before I let you go. One is we'll come back to the mayoral race in a second, but I got to ask you. You and I got into a wonderful conversation downtown not too long ago, and you were telling me, actually, you were telling me about you're from Michigan, I believe, and something to do with, I think, Martin Luther King Day. Is that right?
That's right, Mark. Me, Alex Jewell, Matt Pike, Emily Fisher, John Haynes were a part of a group. Eric Krause, he was our basketball coach. He's still up there. He lives in Sanford. Now he's retired. Are the reason that Midland Public Schools have Martin Luther King Day off. We did not ourselves get to enjoy that day off because I was a junior, and then the year after it went into effect was my freshman year at Western Michigan. Go Broncos. But I was a Midland High chemic. Our basketball coach was like, man, why don't we have the day off on Martin Luther King Day? Like, are we not Midland Public Schools? Like, hello. And they got Mark, they tried to like, oh, let's do a half day assembly. And we were like, no, like just give us the day off. And that worked. That's the only activism I've ever done. I talk about, I have no political home. I am not a partisan. People talk about independent media. Oh, are you one side or the other? No, just doing nonpartisan news, as it should be, I think. But if you have any sort of, if you don't want to question where my values lie, I guess you could sort of take my work to get Martin Luther King Day off. Yes, I am pro Martin Luther King.
So Midland Public Schools now has Martin Luther King Day off. Yes. And you and Alex and the other individuals were responsible for making that happen.
Yes, sir. Yes,
that is awesome. There's an example right there of activism working. That was years ago. You were in high school, and you had the fortitude and the foresight to see that, hey, Michigan, mid-Michigan, right. So
we were the only district that didn't have it. We were the whole Saginaw Valley, basketball. We were thinking about sports. Like every other school in our conference has it off.
Yeah. Recently, you and I had the opportunity of being on the Pulse with Roop Raj. For those of you tuning in from across the country, a local journalist who hosts a nightly show. And it was the night of the State of the City address last week, and I was intrigued by your conversation. So the gist of the conversation certainly was getting your perspective on what was happening, what happened that particular evening. I was want to talk about from a business perspective, and what should the next mayor of Detroit, for example, be focused on? What are the key qualities of the next mayor? And since we're in the electoral season, what's your take on this upcoming election season? What should people be looking for in the candidate and other people that you see out there? Is anybody, connecting with you just yet? I'm not asking for an endorsement, but is there anyone connecting with you, independent, like you say, nonpartisan, who's starting to pique your interest, if you will?
Well, I got 5. I have 5 candidates. There's 10. Santil Jenkins, James Craig, he's a former chief, Mary Sheffield, city council president, Solomon Kinlock, and Fred Durhall. Those are my top 5. Any other candidates, I hate to burst your bubble right now, but we know that there are others out there. Those are the 5 that I think Detroit voters should take the most seriously. Those are the 5 that have bases of voters who are going to support them. And when we talk about all these different candidates out there, I think on the segment last week, someone said there's too many candidates. I'm kind of getting that way too. Like, what's the point? I get running for president knowing you're not going to win because it raises your name ID. But is the same to be said? I mean, even for governor, right? I think Abdul Al-Sayed and Sri Tanadar certainly raised their profiles running against
sure.
In 2018. But what do you get by running a mayoral campaign without support? And the 2 candidates that I see with the most support are Mary Sheffield and Solomon Kinloch. Solomon Kinloch is the Triumph Church pastor. And of course, Mary is the current city council president. Santil is the former city council president a decade ago. Her and Mary have the first active spat between any of these candidates. Santil told me last week at Babo, actually, that she appeared on Frankie Darcel's show and talked about a video that I had posted of Mary saying to a senior home that apparently, according to Santil, she wasn't invited to, that Santil left city council in 2013 amid the bankruptcy at the worst of times for the city.
Yes.
And Santil told me that her mother was disrespected, that Mary got in her mother's face. I'm talking about the time on camera with you, Mark. So I'm going to clip this and tweet it out to the masses. But it's getting more interesting. The filing deadline is April 23 or April 22nd. So around that time is when we're going to have the official field set. But in my this is going to be a Sam Robinson prediction on April 1st. There's 5 candidates: Santil, James Craig, Mary Sheffield, Fred Durhal. And we're going to see what happens. I mean, it's going to be
historically
point they're waiting and seeing. That's what
and historically, Detroit's a kind of a city where name recognition means a great deal. A lot of people, some people dwell into the issues and some people don't, but historically, the candidates that generally have done well has been due to name recognition. And so as you think about, let's take it out of that realm for a second and focus on the issues. And let's go back to what you and I discussed on TV last week as part of the conversation. What should voters be looking for? Let's get beyond the name recognition from their perspective. Mayor Duggan basically took a victory lap last week as part of the State of the City address. So that's now behind his final address. And so looking ahead, what should voters be holding these candidates accountable for in terms of what they should be looking for as they're running for mayor of the biggest city in the state of Michigan?
I think it depends on who you talk to. Supporters for Mary Sheffield are looking for something, kind of specific. Well, I will say you're hearing similar things from all the candidates. That's why James Craig kind of sticks out to some people. But housing issues is the biggest thing that we hear about. Issues with affordability. Obviously we talked about last week on the show, Duggan wanting to lower the city's mill rate in order to make it easier for people to come here, do business here, build homes here. The relationship that these candidates are going to have with the business community, I think each of them are taking on a different sort of role. Fred and Mary, I think, are the ones that are sort of appealing to those kind of folks the most. Although we have seen it from Solomon Kinloch, he has said he'll work with anybody, and we know that he has a history of working with philanthropy for 27 years as the pastor of Triumph Church. We know Santil too is a major player with leaders of nonprofits around the city. When I saw her at a restaurant last week, she was with Annika Goss, the longtime Detroit Future City head. So we know what these folks are about, who Detroiters send through the primary. There's going to be 2 candidates that make it past August is going to say a lot about where their values currently lie. Yeah.
I got to have you back on, man, as we get close, as the process continues to evolve. We'd love to have you back on. I appreciate your insights. you have a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And again,
Thank you, brother. You're trying, man. We got to bring people interested in this shit, man. We got to bring people interested, man, because they're tapped out. My generation is tapped out.
You have and that's the beauty of this. We talk about the next generation. We talk about a fresh set of eyes, and I think what you're doing, Sam, through your social media, you're a media influencer as well, is you're getting the messaging out, and the messaging to a critical part of the population, that generally doesn't watch traditional TV. I'm also, as you know this, I'm also a professor at 3 different universities, and I made this comment last week as part of the panel discussion. I asked my students how many of them actually watch the local news. You remember what the response was? Basically zero. It was, and I asked them how many. This is not a knock on legacy media at all. It's just this is the state of the landscape right now. And I asked how many of you actually read newspapers. They said, "You mean a traditional newspaper, Mark?" I said, "No." Yes. They said zero. They read the links, but they're getting their news. To your point, consuming it through different channels. And I think that's the beauty of you, is you're opening up the lens and you're challenging people to think differently. And I think as we think about this mayoral campaign election, the candidates have to be innovative as well in terms of reaching new audiences across the city. Sam Robinson, how can people find you? What's your website? Do you have a website, or can they reach out to you?
DetroitOneMillion.com, DetroitONEMillion.com. I'm on Twitter. If you look up Sam Robinson Detroit on Google, you will find me. I am Sam Robinson. Mark Lee, man, thank you.
My pleasure. You're the best, man. I'm going to have you back on, and I want you all to check him out, and I want you to make it a great day, and we will check you out next time in the conference with Mark Essie. And by the way, don't forget to subscribe to this particular show as well on YouTube and amongst many other social media channels. I'm making a great day. We'll talk to you all soon. Take care, everyone.
The Lee Group will be holding its 11th annual Small Business Workshop May 14th at 8 a.m. at the Corner Ballpark, located at 1680 Michigan Avenue in Detroit. This year's theme is Thriving Through Uncertainty. Come and join the conversation as business leaders from across Detroit will be addressing this critical issue. This is a free event, and for more information, please go to leegroupinnovation.com. That's leegroupinnovation.com, and click on the Small Business Workshop tab.